to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is a extra special Sunday. There's a 3-part series that I'm just going to compile into one long story. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. I read through it a couple of weeks ago and I've been saving it to the right moment. And I think tonight's the night. Hope you guys enjoy it. Please do let me know down below. Of course, please do like and share. And without further ado, let's get into tonight's story, entitled House Sitting for My Grandparents. The Coyotes Are Acting Weird. Let's get straight into that. Okay, this post got really long, but I wanted to include everything. Hey everyone, I've been a long time reader of this sub, and one of my favourite parts of it is the community. I love how eager everyone is to help and offer ideas. I'm sure you can probably guess I need some help. Well, more just opinions, I guess. A brief overview. My grandparents live on an acreage. I'm not sure exactly how big it is, but it is pretty sizable. They only really pay close attention to a backyard they've fenced off though. The only thing outside of that is a dugout that they rarely use and some farmland, but they're not that interested in using that either. It's very nice. There's a fire pit and a gazebo, even some fruit trees and a garden. The fence is surrounded by a ring of trees to offer a bit of a sense of privacy and a nice naturey scenery. Since they live deep in agriculture land, it's mostly farm fields around, and having those trees just makes it seem a little bit less exposed. I'm here now, house sitting, and have been for the past week. They've had to go away for a family emergency on my grandmother's side, out of the province, and have no idea when they'll be back. My brothers have both just started their uni school year, and I'm the only one in the family with a very flexible job, so I volunteered to do it. It's been pretty uneventful, until it was last night, and today. Something to note. Coyotes have always frequented the area around my grandparents' acreage. I've never actually seen one, but every night at roughly the same time, we can hear them howling at each other. But to what happened last night. Whenever I'm somewhere alone overnight, I always keep the TV on to have some background noise and some light when I go to bed. I'm 23 and have slept with the night light since my teens. I know. Last night was obviously no different. I was curled up in the living room watching Chopped under a blanket with a brewski and some popcorn. Typical night there, whether or not I'm alone, as I'm screaming at one of the contestants for leaving their ice cream in the machine too long with only 20 seconds to spare. I heard an outpour of Coyote Hows. Hobbling over, I went towards the living room window with a perfect view of the backyard to see if I could spot any movement. I did this every night since they lived there. No matter that I never saw anything, I've always loved animals and hoped for the best. Plus, my brother swears he saw one once, so I've got to get the upper leg on him. But as usual, nothing. Bloody annoying. Commercial break. I go to the fridge and grab another bottle to nurse while I fall into the Food Network hell. The howls keep going as they usually do, but instead of dissipating, they seem to get more intense. I went back to the window and tried to see if I could spot anything again. And to my surprise, I did. I could see some shadowy movements in the trees around the yard, quick and hard to make out. I sprinted into the adjacent kitchen and shut off all the lights so I could get a better view. I imagined to make out some movement. Nothing solid, but with the howling, I guess they were coyotes. My grandparents don't have any livestock, so I'm assuming they were just on the hunt or exploring. I don't really know what coyotes eat or how they behave, but it was cool to see. It sucked though. As soon as I got back to the window, the movement only remained for a few more seconds before it was all just darkness in the distance again. A bit miffed, but at least I could stretch the story and say I actually saw one, right? That would be fucking half of it. I dozed off somewhere between the entree round and the dessert round of another episode, and woke up to a weird noise. This area is pretty typically windy, so it wasn't unusual to hear random things outside. Plus, those beers metabolized quickly, and I had to make a dart to the bathroom. I took a big swig from a glass of water after and damn near dropped thing. I could see something in the yard. I turned off the light and crawled over to the window. I really didn't want to scare it away. I was so excited to finally see one. It was about 10 feet away, I'd say, so it was hard to make out in the darkness, but I didn't risk spooking it by turning on the porch lights, so I just stared at it, and it stared back. At first, I thought it was staring at the TV screen, which was pretty visible from that window, but after a few minutes of observing it, I could see what it was really staring at. Me. Its eyes were a piercing golden colour, absolutely gorgeous, and fixated on me. I couldn't make out much else besides dark fur. It wasn't moving either. It didn't blink from what I could see. I watched it for about 15 minutes, maybe that or so, before realising it wasn't moving at all. It was huge. Fluffy too, and its fur was either dark brown or possibly black. I looked at its torso, of course what I could make out of it, and it wasn't moving either. It was stone cold, like a statue. Now I know this is far-fetched, but I was drowsy and a bit buzzed at the time, but I thought the poor thing had died. I felt a bit sad for it, figuring a stroke or heart attack maybe. I don't know. It just seemed a bit sad to look at. Now of course today I realised that if it had actually died, it wouldn't have been standing up. But let's not focus on my nativity. I resolved to call the animal control and see what they could do in the morning to get the poor thing's body disposed of properly, and conked out on the couch. The sun woke me up this morning. I forgot to close the curtains to the window in the living room, so it shone directly on my face and got me right up. I had kind of forgotten about the coyotes then. I just turned off the TV and went to get some coffee and waffle. About halfway through eating, I remembered and rushed to my phone. My dad's a forester and really big hunting enthusiast and would have loved to see a coyote up close, even if it was deceased. So I went to go and snap a pic. I looked at the window first, and then, to my surprise, there was nothing there. It had left. I felt a moment of disappointment that it was gone, but I'm happy it wasn't dead at least. My grandparents wanted me to check on their fruit trees and garden to make sure everything was going smoothly. They had also asked me to spray this glorious concoction of chemicals all over them to keep the deer away. See, my grandparents sprayed everything. The flowers, garden, fruit trees, lawn, everything. I have some young cousins that live about half an hour out, and my aunt and uncle said they'd stop by sometime to visit me so I could see the kids while I'm here. In a small act of defiance to their rigorous and, in my opinion, dangerous spraying ritual, I opted not to spray anything until the day before they'd come home, so the kids could play on the lawn without me wanting to tear my hair out. Seriously, multiple canisters for each section of the backyard. It's excessive, with the toddlers dangerous. But I'd kill myself if the garden or trees succumbed to anything while they were away, especially with the stress my grandparents have been under. So I had to make the rounds. For good measure, I brought along a pellet gun my grandfather kept to scare away any wildlife with me, just in case. I didn't expect to encounter any of the coyotes, but I mean, last night was an anomaly, so I brought it just to be safe. Everything looked fine. Just damn fine, thank you very much, without all the chemical sprays. And I didn't encounter any coyotes, though the howls did die down. At least until I tried to go back. The same, or what I can guess is the same, coyote was standing outside the living room window, staring into it. It was completely still, just like it was last night. I have no idea how it got there without me knowing, because the backyard is really open. I actually got a bit scared this time, and I got the gun ready just in case it wanted to make any sudden movements. As soon as I readied the gun, it turned and looked right at me. And when I say this thing was huge, I mean it was huge. Sure, most of it was probably fur, but it was pretty big, enough to make me nervous. I thought about shooting at it, maybe scaring it off or something, or making a mad dash to the back door. But I'm not that stupid. I caught myself before probably royally fucking up and went along the way around the house to the front door, backing up as I walked to keep my eye on it. It didn't move, just followed me with its gaze. When I got to the front door, I set the gun down on the kitchen counter and went to the window. And yep, it was still there. It was staring at me again as I walked in. Its eyes never left me. It was weird. Man. I took a picture and sent it to my dad to see if he could identify it, because the pictures of coyotes I looked up looked nothing like this beast. This thing was huge and all black. But I don't know, man, the way it just stared at me. I closed the curtains for a little bit and fixed myself some lunch, which I just ate. I just checked, and it's gone. But the howling started back up again, and it's closer, and there's more of it than last night. Maybe it's just me being here alone or something, but it's freaking me out. My dad has no clue what it is. Said there's nothing like that up in our area. We live in northern Canada. He told me just to stay inside and not to leave any doors open. Gladly. I never in my life seen a wolf behave like that. It was so strange. It was like it was just staring right into me, like my soul. I know that's wishy-washy, but damn, it's creeping me out. And I noticed it again. It wasn't breathing. I know its fur was long, but I have 2 fluffy cats at home, and their chests still move when they breathe. Anyway, I'll be around. No chance I'm leaving the house again today. If anyone has any ideas on what the hell that thing was, I'm all ears. I don't really want to jump to the paranormal shit for my own sanity, but really? Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Who knows? Update. It's 4 PM and the howling is farther away now. I think it's fading. Maybe they're moving on. I don't see anything, but I'll keep an eye out of the window. Update 2. Howling started up again, and I can see some movement in the trees. In the morning, I'm going to call my grandparents and ask about the sprays. So, a few of you suggested that the chemicals are to keep these wolf beasts away, and that my grandparents are lying about the reason for them using all of their pesticides. I called up my grandparents and tried to be subtle. Just asked if they'd seen any other animals besides deer trying to get in the yard or at their plants. They said no. They've only ever had a problem with deer. I didn't want to push it, so I let them go. They left the phone number of their neighbour, just in case I needed anything when they left. So, I called them up right away. They live pretty close. If it wasn't for the trees, we could probably be able to see their home, so they'd probably know if something was up. It was kind of weird. An older man answered. I'd never met these neighbours before. Grandparents told me it was an older couple. And he was very friendly. He knew I was house sitting and didn't seem bothered at all by my calling. I made some kind of small talk, telling him I was doing alright and that I didn't know when my grandparents were going to be coming home, etc, etc. He was all very friendly, until I asked about the wolves. Then he got really weird. I immediately asked if my grandparents had asked me to spray their yard. And when I said yes, he immediately asked if my grandparents had asked me to spray their yard. And when I said yes, he then asked me if I'd been doing it. I contemplated lying, but honestly, this whole thing is just freaking me out. And with the suggestions some of you guys gave me, I just told him that I hadn't been spraying. He went silent for a good 10 or 15 seconds. He then kind of brushed it off, mock scolded me for not doing as my elders told me to, in a joking way, and said that if I needed anything, they were home all day. I hung up and thought about spraying, ate some lunch, and then the power went out. The weather was pretty normal, so I just thought it was something to do with the rural areas. I don't know, I've never lived rural before, so I have no idea what options there are. But I just decided to wait for a bit. If it had stayed out until today, I would have called my grandparents again and asked them if I could do anything. But I didn't want them to worry. It did go back on in the middle of the night. All the lights turned on and totally woke me up at like 2 a.m. Anyway, back to yesterday. About an hour or so after the power went out, someone rang my doorbell, and it was an older woman around my grandparents' age, who I was informed was their neighbour, the wife. She brought me some cookies and said she wanted to check on me. She was really reassuring, told me that the wildlife is all over the area and that they were probably just looking for food. She told me to just stay inside until they appeared to be gone and thanked me for warning them about it. I really hate talking to people, especially people I don't know, but she kept the conversation going, even kind of straining to keep things for us to talk about. She mentioned the power at their house had gone also, and that it happened occasionally out here. She estimated it would take a few hours for the power to come back on. She told me in detail how she made the cookies. She told me about the quilt she was making for her daughter. She started talking about gossip in town that I had no idea about because I don't live here, etc. I eventually got rid of her by telling her that I had drawn a bath and didn't want the water to get cold, which she seemed to accept and left. I went back to the kitchen to put the cookies in the fridge. I, celiac, and can't eat gluten, but I did not have the heart to tell her. And honestly, I'm 90% sure I saw a person in the yard. I ran to the living room window, but it seemed like as soon as I got there, whoever or whatever had been there had also run away. I caught a glimpse, but nothing else. It was definitely not a wolf, but I couldn't see much of it, and it had gotten out of my sight before I could fully get the scope of the yard. The power came back on last night and has been on since, but I'm trying this up really fast to post just in case it goes out again. Things I have learned. Sprays are most likely for the wolves like some of you suggested. With the neighbour's reaction, I have no doubt. I think they know more than they're letting on. I don't know if they want to intentionally deceive me or if they're just not wanting to worry me anymore. The wolves have seemed to leave me alone today. I didn't see any yesterday either, but I could hear the howling. It was weird, this howl, this time. It kind of an echoey sound to it. I don't know what this means. The kids shouldn't probably be coming here. I called my uncle and told him that I'm sick and I don't want to give the kids whatever I have. Someone's at the door. I'll update tonight if I can, if there's any changes. Sorry for any typos or anything, just don't want to risk another power outage. Updates. Laugh out loud, yeah, okay. So, letting off at someone at the door was probably not the best idea. I'm alive. It was just a neighbour lady again. She invited me to her house for some tea in case the wolf thing was unnerving me. I said no. She seemed pretty sad, almost as if I declined. I thought a bit sad. I know their kids don't live in the area, so I can't help but feel a bit guilty not going. But I'm afraid as hell to leave the house for obvious reasons. Also, I went outside on the porch to see if I could spot any movement. I saw some of my grandparents' chemical spray things outside on the lawn. I didn't touch them, and the garage they kept in is locked. I'm a bit spooked to leave the confines of my own safe little porch, but tomorrow I will venture out if it stays clear. Hows are gathering up again though, so who knows. It's hard to explain what they sound like, kind of like a bunch of different voices, all trying to get over each other or something. They don't sound entirely wolfish, but I can't place what's wrong. Alright, so I'm getting pretty freaked out. Someone suggested that the husband sprayed while the wife was away, and I think that's true. I went out this morning and sniffed around the grass and trees. They were definitely freshly sprayed, and while I did hear howling last night, I didn't see any activity or anything, and I think that they might be gone. I'm not sure though. Packing the pellet gun every time I go outside just in case. Not that it's going to do much. I picked up the containers on the lawn too and went to go put them back in my garage, but my grandparents' supplies were already there, untouched. That means these containers weren't theirs and someone else left them on the lawn. I called them, felt super bad doing so, but I've got to get this sorted. I asked about the chemicals just out of curiosity. They were kind of confused but answered, and bingo. My grandpa said something that makes a lot of damn sense now. Our neighbours used the same ones and suggested them not long after we started construction. They said they work really well and we tend to agree. I have no idea if my grandparents know exactly why they spray, or if they just think they're spraying for the deer, but holy shit, those old bastards, they know more than they're letting on, and I'm pretty pissed they're keeping it secret. If anything happened to my grandparents, my blood boils just thinking about it. I know this is probably a bit paranoid, but I'm going over to confront them and return their missing chemical containers. If anything happens to me, well, there won't be an update. I seriously doubt they'll hurt me, but with all this shit going on lately, I have no idea what to think about anything. But I'm glad I posted here. I wouldn't have figured this out without you guys. I'll be back soon. Hang tight, and thank you again. And that brings me to yesterday and what happened. I confronted them. I went over to the containers, and as soon as the wife opened the door, I could see it on her face. She called her husband, Hank for referencing, and invited me in. He seemed to be very uncomfortable about the whole situation, admitted that he did in fact spray the yard without my knowledge. They told me that my grandparents started to build their house. They went over a few times and talked them into using the same chemicals they do. They supply them for free as a neighbourly thing, saying that they mix it themselves, which they do apparently, and my grandparents don't know anything about those weird wolf things, which, to be honest, I find it a bit irresponsible and angering on dear old Hank's part, but I digress. He asked if I wanted to really see what's going on, and assured me it would be safe. His wife didn't seem too pleased with that idea, but I was so fed up I didn't care. My grandparents are vulnerable, and they know why, and I needed to know. But I really, really wish I hadn't gone. He sprayed his truck, just a basic pickup, with that lovely chemical BS until it was dripping, and we hopped in. He was very tight-lipped about it and said it was just better if you saw it firsthand. Whatever. His wife watched us leave with a bitter look on her face, but it was his look of stoicism that really got to me. We drove for about 20 minutes, I think. He drove across his land and other fields off-roading the whole time until we got to a thicket of what appeared to be a pretty sizable forest. We parked. He made sure the doors were locked, him triple-checking that was scary as fuck. What's going on? What on earth is going to open the damn doors? And told me to be quiet and not to move. Then he just started talking. Said it needed to be dark out for this to work. He told me about how him and his wife moved there, and another neighbouring family explained everything to them. They didn't believe it at first, but then they showed him, and he believed. He said the spray is mostly the smell, so with the intense smell and difficulty getting into the houses, what the fuck? They were left alone if they sprayed consistently. He wouldn't tell me much about the actual beasts themselves. Just said vague shit that really started to scare me. He wasn't very talkative other than that. Now, I pictured myself as a naive lost girl in the first 5 minutes of every single horror movie on multiple occasions as we waited. Finally, it got dark enough. He turned on the headlights, the interior lights, turned up the radio, cracked the window, and honked a few times. Now we wait, he said, with a weird sort of farmer's drawl, staring at the woods. I did too, and soon enough we saw them. First it was one that stepped out of the cover of the trees and stopped in front of us, just staring, like the one I saw at the house. It stayed there for about 10 minutes before retreating back into the trees. The same unmoving stare. Then came what I assume is the pack. There were about 10 of them. I tried to count, but I kept losing track. It was like they were always in different places when I looked. They slowly approached us, and I could hear the howling start up. It sounded weirdly distant, and none of the wolves approaching appeared to be making any of the noises, but it kept getting intense. Next thing I knew, he was turning up the radio to match the rising level of those howls, which grew to a weird pitch, kind of like a distortion or an echo. Hard to describe. Again, none of the beasts next to us appeared to be making those noises. As soon as the cracked window went up and sealed us safe in the pickup, they all surrounded us suddenly, like immediately. First they were cautiously approaching, but in a second they were all around us, each about 2 to 3 feet from the truck, staring. It was unsettling to say the least, but that wasn't the worst bit. The worst bit was what came out of the woods after that. I don't even know how to properly describe whatever started walking out towards us. It was humanoid, kind of. I can't even for sure say that. It avoided the headlights, keeping to the shadows, but it was approaching us as it stepped forwards with a weird, flowy motions, like its legs were smoke or water or something. Even though I'm sure they were solid, the howling got louder and more high-pitched. Cue another upturn of the radio, and my head was pounding. I could make out skin, hard to tell the colour, but it was darker. It seemed vaguely male and nude, but I couldn't tell for sure. Some places it seemed like there was long hair growing from him, other places looked raw or simply bald, like a very sparse mane or something. His arms were weirdly long too. Hank put his hand on the steering wheel and turned the truck on. He didn't move us, but he looked about to it. If he had said anything to me at all, the radio coupled with the piercing howling drowned it out. And then it got close enough for me to see its face. I'm not a good writer, you guys have seen that, but if I could paint an accurate picture of this to you, I'd just tell you how insanely fucked up it was. I would. It won't leave me. There were teeth, sharp and long ones, small and stunted ones, sticking out of its mouth, like it couldn't close it properly. The eyes were so small and so fucking wide apart and dark or something, not bright like the wolves. There was no eyebrows, but what I think might be an attempt at a beard grew from the left side of its chin, which was in itself set far too back for him to ever be able to chew things properly, and gave him a massive overbite. He drawled too, thick strings down his front. Some just dripped down to his chest and others matted in his hair, presumable from the perpetual open-mouthedness he'd likely had. I could feel him, like he was coming straight for me. The howling got louder with every moment and movement, and started to distinctly sound like an actual person instead of an animal. It was unbearable. Then I screamed, and Hank drove. It was abrupt. We hit a couple of wolves immediately, and he tried to drive over them. It was bumpy as hell, but the truck managed it. The thing shrieked, I think, and started to run at us. He fell forwards on all fours and started almost leaping over the ground. I noticed his arms were about long enough that his torso was horizontal to the ground when he was bent over, and he kept his face trained on us, or me, an unnatural 90-degree angle that he seemed just fine with. Fuck, he was so fast and so erratic. I've never seen anything like that before. We drove fast back towards the house, and I could see them all trying to keep up behind in the rear-view mirror. It was the most horrifying thing I have ever experienced. After about 2 minutes, I heard a familiar noise and realised that my driver man was singing loudly, screaming, really, the lyrics to Despacio, which happened to be on the radio. Kind of hilarious because he obviously doesn't speak Spanish, so it was really just him saying sounds. He raised his hand at me a few times, nodding at me. I realised I had covered my ears, and when I lowered my hands, he kept gesturing to the radio, and then to me. I started singing loudly too. I guess that's what he wanted me to do. He turned the radio up a bit more, I thought my eardrums were going to burst. Everything was hitting me at once, and I could feel my eyes watering. And then we finally got home. He'd driven past his house and brought us to my grandparents' home. As soon as he stopped the vehicle, Dad thought he was going to crash into my grandma's beautiful flowers. He shut the radio off. The howling was still unflinchingly loud, but was more slowly dying off. I couldn't see our pursuers anymore, and we appeared to be in the clear. He watched me with concerned eyes for a couple of minutes until I finally spoke, the howls fading to the distant coyote howl I was used to hearing. I can't remember much of what he said or what he said. Can't remember much of what I said or what he said. Something along the lines of, "Screw you, you crazy psycho, we almost died," or something. He walked me inside and got me some water. I cried a lot. I thought I was actually going to die, and I had never experienced anything of such intensity. I remember he offered to stay the night with me, or to take me back to his house if I was scared. I declined, as scared as I was. He assured me the spray would keep me safe, and I believed him. I had no reason not to. My grandparents lived here for years. I didn't sleep though. I kept every light off in the house and snuck into a windowless room in the basement. I pushed the treadmill up against the door and streamed a bunch of movies to try and fail to distract myself. Every noise, every creak struck me right at the core. I went upstairs after I was sure the sun had risen, and made sure to draw all the curtains and shades all over the house. Then I called them again. Hank answered this time, halfway through the first ring. I think he was waiting for it. He sounded really solemn. I don't think he meant to scare me so badly, but I understand why he did it. He didn't know why though. He didn't know what that was, where it came from, and why it wants us. He tried to assure my safety and my grandparents by saying it never seemed to go through much trouble to get at anyone. That's why the chemicals were so effective. It was lazy, or just didn't bother, or maybe had easier prey. He said people do go missing in the area. Locals rarely walk this rural place alone because it's so inconveniently out of town, and not at all that attractive. But there are transients and vagabonds looking for a convenient free place to crash that sometimes pass by here because of its privacy. Some people think they get lost. Some people doubt they were ever here. Locals don't have to bush parties out here. I learned. Too sketchy. Too many missing kids. He said nothing was confirmed. It was all assumption, but they were pretty educated guesses. I have enough chemical spray to last a few weeks. He promised me that he would keep my grandparents adequately supplied. But I can't stop thinking about that thing. How horrifying it was. How directly it came to me. Even typing out that outwashed anxiety over me. It could have gotten into this house. It could have gotten into the truck. Just because it could. Just because I hadn't bothered to prevent it. And that in itself fucking terrifies me. If you guys want to know more, I can maybe ask Hank. But I won't be posting any more parts. My grandparents called to check in, and it looks like they'll be on their way for at least another week or so. Hank's going to stop by tomorrow to show me how to properly spray. Wow, hope you guys enjoyed that three-part series all in one. Please do let me know if you prefer me doing three parts in one video, one whole story. Of course, I'd like to know that feedback. Of course, please do like and share. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for your support in the last few days. It has been incredible, and I'm very humbled by your words. That's it from me tonight, guys. Have a lovely evening or morning, and remember, when you hear the bang outside or the creak of the floorboards, is it really worth looking? Who knows? But remember, be safe not sorry.